everyone. My name's Cody Hallowell. I'm Leanne's eldest grandson. This is my younger brother, Tyson, and my younger brother, Logan. It's nice to be joined by you all. We really appreciate it. In the fall of 1962, George and Leanne, whom my brothers and I call Nene, so you'll hear that referred to, lived in Monte Vista, Colorado. George was a refuge manager for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Nene was pregnant with my mom, Leslie. They lived in a small trailer on the Kofi Game Range, and it wasn't unusual for George to set out alone for a few days at a time, studying the multitudes of waterfowl in the area. Nene, not too many months removed from her previous living situation in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia, was making a new home. Following this man out to the relative wilds of southwestern Colorado was, needless to say, something that only Nene had committed to. The rest of her family was still very much on the fence about the decision. But it was there, beneath the purple and blue gaze of the Sangre de Cristo, sorry Nene, that Nene began her deep love affair with the Rocky Mountains, all because of her deeper love for my grandfather George. Perhaps for both of them, in an attempt to explore and hopefully deepen the bond, it was decided that a pregnant wife would accompany her husband out onto the range for one of the scheduled flock assessment expeditions. Basically, it was a government-sanctioned camping trip. The routine consisted of a pre-dawn rising, a hike through varied terrain, some dry, some not so dry, to a pre-established waterfowl blind. As the bright orange morning sun rose over the dark Raspberry Mountain, the birds would begin their day, and so too would George, counting, observing, and noting all the particulars for later dissemination and review. But silence and stealth were of the utmost importance to achieve this. One typically lay very flat on their stomach or on their back for the most optimum cover. So, as a bountiful flock of whooping cranes lifted out of their nest to take flight towards their breakfast destination, it was my grandfather George who sharply whispered to Nene, "Get down, Leanne, get down." And it was Nene, laying on her belly, which held a 6-month baby girl, who defiantly hissed back, "I am, George, I am down." No wonder, then, that shortly thereafter, my mom was born, 2 months premature, at 2 pounds, 1 ounce. With no ambulance available, my grandfather George got a police escort for the 100-mile-an-hour, 50-minute drive to the nearest ICU. And it's not in my notes, but I'm pretty sure that was in a drop-top white convertible. Yeah, pretty cool. So the 50-minute drive, So the 50-minute drive to the nearest ICU. I imagine that, in part, had something to do with the family coming off the fence in regards to Nene's Western proposition.
In the fall of 1965, Leanne traveled with her mother, Gingy, a 2-year-old Leslie and Evan, just days old Evan, from Fort Collins to Carbondale, arriving to their new abode at CRMS. Leanne often mentioned how she proudly nursed Evan atop Loveland Pass, which may explain his propensity for the good stuff. Not only was George hired as a science instructor and Leanne destined to participate in student guidance and counseling, but they were to be the first dorm parents of the new boys' dorm, next to the old boys' dorm on the banks of the Crystal. The added responsibility of being dorm parents, as you may imagine, was something that was most likely glossed over in the new hire discussions for educators who wanted to teach at an up-and-coming boarding school. There was probably some inferred or even added incentive, but the reality of having responsibility of monitoring and maintaining a couple dozen male teenagers was certainly not discussed in length. In August of '65, the Stones, the Beatles, the Byrds, and Dylan were competing for airtime with their new singles, Can't Get No Satisfaction, Help, Mr. Tambourine Man, and Like a Rolling Stone. We don't know. Well, we remember them now, but not back then. So, combine this with the Johnson signing the Mann and Voting Rights Act, and the Watts riots, and the ramping up of the Vietnam War, you might imagine that on any Friday or Saturday night, when no school assignment were due the next day, there was a strong likelihood that the boys might be a bit rambunctious during the late PM hours. And so it was that one of those fall weeknight nights, there was an ironic conflict of occurrences. The first being the aforementioned increase in volume and actions of the teenage occupants. The second being an attempt by a most certainly fatigued mother to put her small children to bed. It has been rumored that on one or more of these conflicting occasions, a knock would be heard on the student's door. Mind you, students didn't knock on each other's door. So fearing that the knocker was most certainly faculty, the stereo would be silenced and any other untoward activity would be hidden as quickly as possible. Upon opening the door, there stood Nene with a wailing infant, Uncle Evan. It was described as follows. It was described as follows. Without saying a word, she would walk right into our room with that crying baby, place him in one of our beds, turn and walk out, and quietly close the door.
Somewhere around the end of the 60s, George and Leanne moved up to Missouri Heights. This was after 2 years at the CRMS New Boys Dorm and 2 years up 133 at the Holden's house by the Crystal. The love of the West, the draw of the Valley, and the community of Carbondale had finally culminated in building a home of their own, up on the hill. Although spectacular with views, solitude, and nature, it did offer some new challenges to Garfield County life, especially during certain times of the year, like winter. One particular new routine involved getting the kids, my mom and Uncle Evan, to school. Typically, the school bus would travel the county roads, and stop at the end of driveways to pick up the kids for school. However, if there weren't any little people standing on the side of the road, the bus would zoom past onto the next potential pickup. In the early fall and late spring, George and Nene expected Mom and Uncle Evan to run down the driveway to the county road to meet the bus, and at the end of the day, walk back up the driveway to the house. Mind you, it was a steep half-mile trek for a first and third grader. But in wintertime, Nene would provide the shuttle service up and down, except that she had a bit of an ever-growing reputation for running a bit behind schedule. Invariably, as they careened down the snow-covered switchbacks and approached the county road, they'd often see the yellow bus zoom past the end of the driveway. But fear not, for in her pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, Nene would step on the gas and begin the pursuit. Honking the horn and trying to pass were only some of the methods employed to stop the bus. Sometimes it worked, and after sliding to a stop either behind, next to, or in front of, Nene would jump out, a child on each arm, and thrust them through the folding door of the warm transport. Other times, because the target had long since passed and perhaps was already off the hill and close to the town, it was the full 7-mile e-ticket ride at top speed, ending on 3rd Street at the infamous lower school Hendecagon, that's right, a building with 11 sides. And the same as before, with no shame or concern at all, Nene would exit the vehicle in plain view of the principal's office and many classrooms.
She would hug and kiss Mom and Uncle Evan, hand them their lunches, and send them on their way. Then, elegantly and calmly, regaled in that pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, she'd hop back in the car and speed back up the hill to Missouri Heights, often with the tail of her robe caught in the shut door, flapping against the vehicle's wet, muddy sides. Urgent, deliberate, mostly hasty driving habits were one of her many renowned characteristics. It is this methodology, the propensity of overcoming obstacles and adversities, that Nini continued throughout her years, right up to the very end. Although she did finally acquiesce and moved off the hill and down to town in a little house right next to the Crystal. My brothers and I just wanted to thank everyone for coming. We wanted to thank the beautiful stories, the beautiful music, and everyone that has shared thus far. I wanted to just briefly share a note that Nini left for me once on my pillow, and a haiku I crafted because of it. Waves. Just a small ripple, now a typhoon of pure love. Waves don't ever die. After falling short of a very pivotal milestone in my life, my grandmother, Leanne, was there to catch me. There was no big speech, no in-depth conversation, but rather a note on a pillow that enabled me to pick myself up and continue onward, character intact. I have come back to this note time and time again. I know it will serve me well in the future, and today in the present, I share it with you. I'd like you all to imagine that she is speaking to you through this note, not just me. Dear Logan, somewhere along the way, someone or something told you focusing on passion was a waste of time. It is okay to follow your heart, and you must remember that. It is okay to lean into your strengths while time and discipline work on your weaknesses. Most of all, it is okay to be yourself. You will always be that little boy reading his book to me, but I am proud of the young man you have become. Love, Nini. My grandmother, Nini, you saw me when I couldn't see myself. Your note was a pebble in the pond. It sent out ripples throughout my life. Your life was a tidal wave that carried us all along and will continue onward into my son's life and future generations. The waves you created will live on and on and on. Thank you.
I just wanted to briefly touch on that as we're here to celebrate Nini's life. She had a passion for hummingbirds, and she loved them very much. She had a feeder, and boy, there was a whole army of hummingbirds that would come visit her every single day. So when you guys see a hummingbird, I'd like you to think of my grandmother, because she was that heartbeat for all of us, you know, and she was like a breath of fresh air when you were in her presence. You were always welcome in it. You would always love to be in her energy, to be around her. She was a best friend, and to all of us. I mean, she would speak to your heart, and she was a resilient woman, and she had a lot of strength. And that strength lives in us all of us who have been touched by her, all of us who have lived with her, around her. She is an incredible woman, and she still lives on through all of us, and I feel her every day. I mean, I still hear her saying here and sure and touch my hand, and if you kissed her on the head, she would hum like a hummingbird. And she was the apple of our eye, and we thank you for being here.
sorry. Thank you very much for all being here. It means the world to my sister and I, everybody else who's here and has participated, and I know it means the world to Mom. So thanks. Simple step, simple sound. Walk on through and turn around. I hear my heart, I feel it's live. The fear is strong, it's like a knife. Moving up, it leaves me bare. All unfamiliar everywhere. So even if it's time to leave, at least I'll know you made me breathe. I said, hey, hey, hey. I said, hey. Hey, hey, breathe. Simple step, simple sound. I walk on through and turn around. I feel my heart, I hear you lie. The fear is gone without a knife. I said, hey, hey, hey. I said, hey, hey, breathe. I said, hey, hey, breathe. Somewhere, a place to hide. Nowhere, goddamn the ride. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody here, everybody who has participated today. It means the world to all of us. And one of her grandsons rightly said that what would Nene like for the finale, and that would be appetizers and desserts. So head on out. Enjoy. Thank you very much.
You did it. Logan, I'm Patty. Hi.
I'll give you a hug too.
Oh, thanks. Yes.
I bet you guys feel like moving your legs. That was a long program. Robin and I used to come over and talk on the trampoline. Thank you, babe. That was fun. Thank you. Did you like it? Was it okay?